We're back with another episode of App Stories. Today's show is brought to you by ZocDoc, Fitbod, and Pillow. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I want to talk to you again today about Mastodon apps. We went over the iPhone and iPad apps before, but that's really just the tip of the iceberg because there are a lot of web apps in particular, as well as Mac apps, and there are some utilities. So I think we should go through all three of these categories and talk a little about each one of them. I've got actually all of these things open on my Mac as we record.
Okay.
So I will probably hit some sort of rate limit with Mastodon or something. But
Perfect.
I can look at them while we talk.
Before we get to that, I have some iPad follow-up.
Oh, you do?
It's going to take me... it's going to take me a few minutes because there have been some updates and I have done some more research, and I think I need to talk about 3 apps specifically for their iPad versions. So first of all, something came by a couple of days ago on Mastodon. I believe it was Gavin Nelson who posted old screenshots from my review 12 years ago or something of the first version of Twitter for iPad. And that took me down this trip down memory lane. Do you remember the original Twitter for iPad?
Oh, I sure do.
The one with all the sliding panes and all the, the custom UI. And that client was amazing. It was made by Lauren Brichter shortly after Lauren joined Twitter.
Before they ruined it.
And it was so innovative and amazing and totally unlike anything I had seen at the time. And it was truly, I think, the reason why it made me think is that was the time from 2010 to 2012, before iOS 7 in 2013, basically, somebody on Mastodon called them bespoke iPad UIs. And I think that's a good term for them. At the time, and I'm sure you remember this, John, when the iPad was new, everybody was rushing to make really custom interfaces for the iPad to really take advantage of what an iPad could be, right? And I think, we've seen at the time there were so many incredible examples of that kind of UI. I'm thinking of iBooks, for example. I'm thinking of Twitter. I should probably go on Mac Stories and filter by date. If only we had
we could do that.
Proper date filters. I know, right? But it was really the time of where developers were thinking, all right, the iPad cannot do multitasking, cannot do split screen on multiple windows. We have the full screen at our disposal. What can we do? And we got so many incredible looking interfaces, which I think that became something of a lost art for a variety of reasons. Surely the arrival of iOS 7 didn't help.
Right.
So many of these interfaces were simulating photorealistic elements, and that of course went away. But then I think it was also the fact that the iPad got support for multitasking. I think it also caused developers and designers to say, well, how can I make a full screen bespoke custom UI if I don't have the guarantee that my app is going to run in full screen all the time?
Exactly, right.
So that became really challenging, and now we have basically reached this state where the iPad version of something has to support multi-column, probably needs to have a sidebar, and generally speaking, also because of universal apps, has to be consistent with its Mac version. iPad apps today are very different from iPad apps from a decade ago, and essentially, I feel like it's impossible to replicate Twitter for iPad, but I think there's still an opportunity to do something a little different, a little more than the iPhone version of a Mastodon client. Does this make sense to you, John?
Yeah, it does. And I think you're right. I think, things like multitasking have really put some handcuffs on developers and designers. In some respects, it's not a bad thing. I mean, those were all features that were good additions to the iPad. However, if developers and users came to expect that those things would be available in those apps, and now an iPad app feels broken if you can't put it side by side with another app, for instance. And so the space just isn't there for those kind of designs. But I think that although the structure of a timeline in Mastodon has a lot of similarities with Twitter, because there aren't the same constraints on the APIs that developers had to deal with Twitter, there's an opportunity both to introduce unique features, but also to design it a little differently too.
Yeah. So the apps I mentioned, first of all, in Ivory, right now in the Ivory version for iPad, as we mentioned, you can use a secondary column for one of the built-in views that you can change from the column. So you can have your activity view, your mentions, your stats, your profile page. This cannot be, however, a custom view. And this is something that I wish Tapbots would explore down the road. Like, let me, put together my own view for like a pinned instance, for example, which we're going to talk about later. Or maybe a saved search, or maybe a profile from somebody else. Let me put it there in the secondary column. And generally speaking, and I think I was not complaining, but I was suggesting this about Tweetbot years ago, and it's still true for Ivory as well. I really think Ivory on the iPad should go the multi-column route, like Tweetbot used to do on macOS. I should be able to have not 2, but 3, 4 multiple columns like TweetDeck. For now, Ivory does support multi-window, but only if you drag in a new window either from the dock or Spotlight manually. I haven't found any visible buttons in the UI to spawn a new window by pressing something.
Yeah, I don't think you can. At least not that I've noticed. Yeah.
Ice Cubes, we also mentioned this last week on the iPhone, has received in the meantime, it's an open source project. Multiple people are contributing to the open source project. It has received multiple updates already. Unfortunately, right now it follows the same approach as Ivory with the secondary column. So again, I think it's nice that there's a narrow sidebar. I would like to customize that sidebar. And on the right side, there's a column. I would also like to customize that column, and I would like to actually add multiple columns to the iPad UI.
Yeah, Federico, one of the things we'll talk about a little bit with the Mac apps is, and we'll get into it more there, is that I agree with you in terms of the multi-column. I'd like to be able to order the columns the way I want to, because it drives me bananas. There's just sometimes, depending on how you're working, you may not want them in the way that they're offered by the developer. You might want to move things around. It may not be that your timeline is what you want to focus on. So let me move those columns around too.
I agree. I believe in the meantime, Ice Cubes was updated with support for long pressing a post to show a context menu, which I think is one of the things we complained about last week. Mm-hmm. And scrolling in the timeline is better than before. The developer has been able to further optimize the Swift UI engine behind it. However, it still does not do state restoration for the timeline the way I want it to. Like if I quit the app 3 days ago and I open it 3 days later, I should still be in the same spot. Instead, Ice Cubes, it defaults to scrolling you all the way to the top of your most recent post in the timeline. I believe the developer said they are working on it, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed this will come in the future. My surprise for this episode has been Tusker. We also mentioned Tusker last week.
Right.
I hadn't spent a ton of time with the iPad version. Let me tell you, I had a surprisingly good experience with Tusker. First of all, when you tap on a profile or when you tap on a post, I believe it opens like in a secondary view on the side. So like it really takes advantage of the space on the iPad. Instead of opening a pop-up or instead of, like in Ivory, navigating into a nested view, it opens that view off to the side, which I think is a much better usage of the space on the iPad, like Spring used to do for Twitter, and the way I believe Mona does right now in beta for Mastodon. You can, in Tusker, open any view, including the links in the sidebar, in a new window by long pressing on them. In the context menu, there's an open a new window button. So that's very nice. And I really liked how in Tusker you can pin timelines from other Mastodon instances to the sidebar of the iPad. So that makes it super easy to switch between, for example, I've been really enjoying the indieapps.space instance. And this is a timeline that's all about indie apps, where indie apps can post like what they're working on, their latest updates, the features that they are shipping. It's great. And you can pin it to the sidebar of Tusker. And those instances that you add, they sync back to the iPhone. So that later you pick up Tusker on the iPhone, you find your instance there. So these are my iPad updates for this week episode after the main show we did last week.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear, especially about Tusker. I need to check that out on the iPad. I think I've only used it on my iPhone so far.
Yeah, it's surprisingly good.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by ZocDoc. It really sucks when you're going to a doctor's appointment and you expect that you're going to be the center of attention, and then your doctor seems like they have better things to do or places to be. And instead of listening to you intently, asking you how you feel and helping you along, the doctor is checking the clock. On ZocDoc, that doesn't happen. You'll find quality doctors who focus on you, listen to you, and prioritize your care. ZocDoc is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, are available when you need them, and treat almost every condition under the sun. ZocDoc is perfect for a lot of different people, but I'll tell you, I recently moved to North Carolina and didn't have any doctors down here, and so I was browsing through ZocDoc's listings of doctors down here, and it was great to have a resource where I knew that the doctors with all these different specialties were patient-reviewed, and I could see that they would take my insurance. It was a really reassuring thing to see. When you're not feeling your best and you're just trying to hold things together, finding great care shouldn't take up all of your energy, and that's really where ZocDoc comes in. Using the free app that millions of users rely on, you can find the right doctor that meets your needs and fits your schedule. Book an appointment with a few taps in their app and start feeling better faster with ZocDoc. Go to ZocDoc.com/appstories and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/appstories. ZocDoc.com/appstories. Our thanks to ZocDoc for their support of App Stories. All right, Federico, let's dig into some of these web apps first, because I think that this is where this has been, I think, as active, if not more active than even the iOS space, right? These things are popping up, and I'm sure there will be some that we miss, but we've got at least 5 or 6 of them here that we want to talk about.
And this is totally a new thing, right? Like a web Twitter client is not a thing we ever had in before.
No, I mean, other than the official one, which I never really liked very much and rarely used, but yeah, exactly. And so why don't we start with Elk, because Elk's the one that I'm using most these days. When I started using Mastodon regularly again, I started with the official website, which has an advanced view, which gives you multi-columns, which is interesting. And it's not really, the way the UI lays out isn't really to my taste, but it works pretty well. And because it's the official website, you can do basically anything you need to do on it. So it has that advantage as well. But I really like the design of Elk. It's got a really nice clean UI, good search. I did run into a problem yesterday that I asked you about, I know, which was I had trouble uploading images. And I don't know if that's a bug in Elk right now, because I'm pretty sure I uploaded images to it before and it was working in the main Mastodon website, but who knows what's going on there. You can filter notifications so that you're only seeing your mentions. Another nice feature if you're getting a lot of boosts and things like that. And overall, I guess I would say, it's very Twitter-like, I guess, in a lot of ways. Oh, and it added lists just today. I think you said
just today, version 0.7. I literally opened it and it asked me to update, because one of the things about Elk is that you can install it as a PWA, as a progressive web app, and it tells you, hey, there's a new version. You click update and it auto installs, or whatever the terminology is. And yeah, it just added. I don't have any lists yet. Do you have lists?
I started a list of apps that I found, but I didn't get very far, so I haven't really spent a lot of time on that. I have a VIP list that one of the apps decided it wanted to make for me, and I put you in there to test it. And then, which makes no sense because I can always just look at our local timeline and see anything you've posted there anyway. But you're a VIP in my heart, Federico, so I put you there.
Okay, appreciate it. You are as well.
Did I sound sincere? I hope I sounded sincere.
Yes, absolutely sincere.
Okay, I like in Elk that there's this 3-dot button too, because if you click on this 3-dot button, you've got options to show who favorited and boosted a post.
I love that button.
Yeah, that's really good because he's got that. You've got the ability to copy the link from there, which will create an Elk version of a Mastodon link. It'll take it back into Elk if somebody opens it. You can also copy the original link to the post, which is just the straight up Mastodon link, as well as share from here, open the original site, which opens that person's Mastodon instance, or you can reply from this spot. So you've got 6 options right behind this 3-dot menu button, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, Elk is very nice. I've been testing it everywhere, and I believe they're also working on native versions that are like desktop wrappers for the web client, but this is showing a lot of promise.
Yeah, there's a lot. You could, with any of these web apps, you could always wrap them yourself in something like Unite, which is a really good wrapper app for the Mac. That's the one that I've been using mostly these days. I haven't tried that yet because I've just kind of pinned Elk in Safari, and that's been adequate, but I'm going to try Unite at some point too, I think.
One I really liked is one you discovered. You sent me the link for this, Fampi. So first of all, Fampi, a great name, because Fampi is a Pokemon. It's an elephant Pokemon. So I really like the fact that this is named after, I believe, the creators of Fampi must be fans of the Pokemon. Kind of unique design. This one reminds me of some Twitter clients that used to be popular at the time, of course. I'm talking 10 years ago, where each post in the Fampi timeline is like its own... It's like a card. It's like its own self-contained cell. And it looks really lovely.
It's like maybe iOS 4, iOS 5 era.
Yes, it's got that sort of vibe. And I think the developers have done a really nice job with the fonts and colors and just little touches here and there. Like, for example, how if a post is part of a thread, there's an indicator that tells you, hey, this is a thread. And when you click on it, when you click on the post in the timeline, the thread slides in from the right side, which is super cool, very nicely done, very polished. And there are no counters for things like likes and boosts on a post, but you do have actions for like liking something or replying or saving into your bookmarks.
Yeah, one thing they do that's kind of interesting with boosts is that as you scroll through your timeline, you'll find these wider blocks here and there, where I have one, for instance, it says, at the top it says 7 boosts, and then I can scroll horizontally, and what it's showing me are a series of posts that have gotten, I guess, more boosts than others in my timeline, I think, because here's one from Steve Troughton Smith, and another one from the maker of Ice Cubes, and a bunch of others that are all have.
Pretty sure we're literally looking at the same boosts right now. I have the same ones.
Okay, we probably follow most of the same people, but yes, that's kind of an interesting way to handle that.
I love this feature. This is an experimental feature in Fampi. I think it's called the Boost Carousel.
Yes.
And I guess the idea is to, every once in a while in the timeline, to collapse the boosts, which are by nature different from regular posts. So because they are different, instead of showing them in line, what if we could group them and collapse them into this horizontally scrolling section? So you can scroll your timeline and every once in a while be like, hey, let me take a look at some of these boosts as well. This is the kind of like design, innovation, and experimentation that I am super here for right now with Mastodon.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really cool. I mean, my thing, I guess I have a couple of things that I'm not as big a fan of with this one, which is there's really no other view other than your home timeline. You don't have the ability to look at other, like a federated thing or a local instance or pin anything. And for whatever reason, the compose button doesn't work for me. I get an error that says failed to load instance configuration. Please try again. And
I got the same error. I see the button, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure what's going on there. But I mean, I think the design is really lovely. So hopefully they'll get that compose button figured out. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Fitbod. This is typically the time of year that many of us start thinking about changing up our fitness plans. So I'm pleased to let you know that Fitbod is an easy and affordable way to build a fitness plan that's just for you. Fitbod's algorithm learns about you, your goals, and your training ability, and will create a custom dynamic program based on your experience and any equipment that you have. This is all in an app that makes it incredibly easy to learn and perform each exercise. Personal fitness isn't about competing with other people. You don't want to look to others and try to do what they do. What you need is something that will work for you. That's when it will really stick, and you'll see the results that you're looking for. Everyone's fitness path is different, which is why Fitbod uses data to make sure they customize things exactly to suit you. Fitbod's powerful technology understands your strength training ability, studies your past workouts, and adapts to your available gym equipment. And your training plan will maximize fitness gains by intelligently varying intensity and volume between sessions. Overworking some muscles while underworking others can negatively impact results. That's why Fitbod tracks muscle fatigue and recovery to design a well-balanced workout routine. The Fitbod app is so simple to use, with over 1,400 HD video tutorials shot from multiple angles to make sure that learning each exercise is a breeze. And it integrates with the Apple Watch, Wear OS smartwatches, and apps like Strava, Fitbit, and Apple Health. Historically, I've done most of my exercising by running or walking, and I really needed to add strength training to my routine. And I had some equipment, but I didn't really know how to get started. And Fitbod is perfect for that. You just tell it what you've got and what your fitness level is, and it tracks your other workouts to give you a well-rounded program. That's the most important thing, I think, here, is that it takes the load off you figuring out what that well-rounded program should be and does it for you and keeps you on a path of improving fitness, which I really like. Personalized training of this quality can be expensive, but Fitbod is just $12.99 a month or $79.99 a year. But you can get 25% off your membership by signing up today at fitbod.me/appstories. Go there right now and get a customized fitness plan at fitbod.me/appstories, and you'll get 25% off your membership. That's fitbod.me/appstories for 25% off. Our thanks to Fitbod for their support of the show.
All right. I have not tried two of these other ones, Halcyon and Semaphore. Have you played around with this?
I have. And Halcyon has kind of a dark blue UI. It's, it's 3 columns, but the columns there on the left, you'll see your profile with kind of your post following and followers stats. On the far right, you'll see a who to follow list and a trending hashtags list, both of which are empty for me. And I don't know if that's because of running our own instance or what, as well as kind of a little hideable ad for a Firefox extension, which I have not tried. So I'm not really sure what exactly that does. Probably grabs a link or something so you can post it. But in any event, the main timeline is down the middle. At the very top of the timeline, it says what's happening, and it has your avatar there, and you can click into it and create a post, and then it has arrayed beneath it very ivory-like, spots for buttons for images, content warnings, visibility polls, all that stuff, all there. And then the timeline is arrayed below that, and it has, when you've come across a thread, it connects them with lines down the side, which is really kind of a nice touch because you really get a good sense for what's a thread and what's not immediately. And if you click on a particular post, it opens up in its own little pop-up window. So it expands it. And that's particularly nice for things like threads to kind of get a closer look at them, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, and, for instance, like here's a tech meme, here's a tech meme story, tech meme post. And if I click on it, this one's not a thread. It gives me more of a preview of the article that's linked. So it's a way to get more details about each post. Mastodon is a little bit like TweetDeck in that it is a multi-column version of Mastodon. And so it has a very familiar UI for that sort of thing. It allows you to have columns for all different aspects of your Mastodon account. You've got, home, activity, bookmarks, searches, all kinds of different things as options to include here. What you cannot do, though, is you cannot reorder these, I don't believe. You can't.
No, you can. You
can. You
can. Yeah, so it's kind of hidden, but if you go in settings, columns, and then you use the little arrows next to the number of the column, you can move them up and down.
All right. See, I missed that. I wasn't looking at that. All right.
It should be easy. You should be able to do it from the main UI of Mastodon.
Yeah, no, I see now that they have all those numbers there, and you can move around. Well, that's good to know. And some of these are editable, but you can put all kinds of things in here: hashtags, lists, bookmarks, favorites, different user profiles, all this stuff. And it's a little busy, I think. I mean, I think the UI maybe could stand to maybe create more padding, which would create less space for columns. But on the other hand, it is just a little bit hard to read. Now, I know there are some settings for column width. So maybe what I need to do is change my column width a little bit and mess around in there a little bit more. But what I'd really like more than anything else is to be able to add multiple accounts. And that really kind of goes for all of these services. This isn't really unique to Mastodon. I want to be able to log in with several accounts and be able to quick switch between them. But I don't believe any of these things that we're looking at today support that.
Yeah, I don't believe they do. And I think Mastodon, along with Elk, is the one with the most potential right now, if only from a productivity perspective. That said, there's a few things that I wished Mastodon had. For example, there's no contextual menu for posts in any timeline. Like, you cannot right-click them. There's no ellipsis button that you can press to open additional actions.
Right.
And so if you want to copy a link to a post, for example, I wouldn't know how to do it from my timeline right now. I suppose you can. No, you cannot click on the timestamp. So there's that. The activity view. So you can pin an activity column in Mastodon. However, there's no way to filter that activity to just mentioned. It shows you all activity items, every single notification, every single mention, all in one list. And I think we've already seen some examples. I believe Fampi does this, Elk does this. First of all, I think you should be able to, those notifications, they should be grouped by type every once in a while. So 20 people boosted your post or 5 people liked your post. And you should also be able to filter by just mentions. But I think this one really has potential. I've always said, you know me, I got a big display, I got a big monitor, give me multiple columns.
Yep.
So I'm keeping an eye on this one.
All right, Federico, let's talk about the Mac apps. And this is really kind of a sad category, to be honest, right now. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I went looking for Mac apps. And we know that the Tapbots folks are working on one, but it's not out in official beta yet that I know of. And so I'm hoping that we get that relatively soon. There are 2 other betas that I've been playing around with that we talked about last week. One is Woolly, which has multi-column, but it's a weird multi-column in that you can never look at more than 3 columns at a time. So you can resize the window, but you'll never see more than 3 columns. But there can be more than 3 columns, but you have to scroll to the right to see them. That I don't especially like. But of these, this is a pretty nice one. I mean, I think Woolly was one of the better betas that we talked about last week on iOS, and it's really nice here. Very similar to what you would see on the iPad with Woolly. The other one is Mammoth, and Mammoth, I think last week we said that Mammoth was due to come out this week, and you know what? Turns out it didn't. So the developer's still working on it. It should be out very soon, but it isn't out yet. This one is just like on iOS and iPadOS, highly configurable. There's all sorts of different things you can change, whether it's colors and themes or the way things look. It's really kind of nice that way. It's multi-column, bunch of different columns that can be activated. I turned a whole bunch of them off. Unlike Woolly, it will let you resize the windows that you can see as many of the columns as will fit on your screen at once, which I really appreciate. So I think that this one's got a lot of potential too. But again, I'm not going to go into too much depth because I don't know what state this is in terms of being ready to ship. So it's not out yet, but keep an eye out for both Woolly and for Mammoth. Now, the rest of these, the official client isn't too bad. It's very basic. The official client looks a lot like something like Tweetbot or the Twitter app days gone by, that it has icons along the left sidebar, and then it has your timeline in the middle. And generally, I just kind of look at it in that kind of narrow vertical column like that. If you expand it horizontally a little bit, you can get a little search box, and it'll save your recent searches too, which is kind of nice. So it works pretty well, but it's not very customizable and not much else you can do with it there. Beyond that, I don't really have anything for you, Federico, because Mona is in beta, but I can't get Mona to install on my Mac for some reason.
Oh, no.
I think I waited too long, and that the way you get the Mona beta is you have to have Spring, which I have, and then in the About box, you go in there and there's a link in there. And by the time I actually installed it, I think the beta must have been full, so I haven't been able to install it. And so I haven't tried it on the Mac. So no comments there. The rest of these, Toot, Metatext, and Mastodon, I've tried all of them on the Mac, but they're all running in compatibility mode on Apple Silicon. And those are not, Mastodon's a good app. Metatext and Toot, this is the one with 3 O's in the middle. Neither of those are really my favorites to begin with, but none of them really work super well as kind of an iPad app spread out onto a Mac. So not super happy with any of those options.
Yeah.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep helps improve your health and well-being. Pillow is a simple app that can help you become more aware of your sleep patterns to improve your sleep. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch to bed. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just an iPhone or an iPad, you can do that too by starting a sleep session before you go to sleep. If you have an Apple Watch, though, you can also get important information about your heart rate trends, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels throughout the night. You can also record sounds that may disturb you in your sleep, like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, and more. If your Apple Watch is a Series 6 or newer, Pillow also displays information about the intensity of those sounds for each sleep session. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions. Pillow comes with a dedicated section that helps you figure out trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and lets you compare your sleep metrics with your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other data. If you want to wind down and relax before going to sleep or listen to something throughout the night, Pillow comes with a collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music created just for sleep. Pillow can also wake you up using your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad at the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. Its battery consumption is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't have to register an account or create a new account to use Pillow. You can use it anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of terrific features that you can use every day for free. If you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's also an option for a 7-day free trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show.
All right, now I would like to mention a few utilities for Mastodon. The little companion apps that we can use alongside our main clients for whatever platform we may be using. Retoot by Simon Stovring, really useful utility that I think ideally we shouldn't have to use something like this. However, for now it gets the job done. So Retoot, it's a utility that was created to compensate for the lack of the native ability to quote a post on Mastodon. In the weeks after, since Retoot first came out, Mastodon has made it official they are going to work on a native quote functionality. So you will be able, just like you could quote a tweet on Twitter before, you will be able to quote a post on Mastodon. Mm-hmm. However, for now, the easiest way, sort of the quote-unquote community standard that we've all established, is to either include just a link to another post that you want to quote, or also take a screenshot of the post that you're quoting. And Retoot automates that process for you. So you just you paste a link to a Mastodon post you want to comment on. It auto-generates a nice-looking image of that post for you. Also offers to copy the link to the post, and I believe it even lets you attach a description for the alt text attribute of the image. And it's just a very nice way to save a bit of time instead of taking the screenshot, copying of a post and cropping the screenshot manually. Retoot does it all for you, and just ideally, not ideally, practically speaking, we will probably stop using this in a few months when Mastodon will have a native quote functionality, but for now, gets the job done. Yeah, it's another way to support a fantastic indie developer like Simon.
Yeah, no, it's really well done. It works a little differently depending on which app you're using it with, because some apps support copying more of this stuff into a new post, without having to kind of go back and forth. But it does get the job done, and I've used it a handful of times here and there, and I'm really glad that it exists.
Linky, which we've covered many, many times on Mac Stories and the Club and App Stories before. It's a share sheet utility that lets you tweet from Safari and other apps. Before it lets you tweet, now it lets you post on Mastodon. Linky has supported, it turns out, I was not familiar with this, Linky has supported Mastodon for a while, and it now also supports including text shots. So like attaching images of web selections from Safari, and you can post them on your Mastodon account. And it's just an excellent share sheet utility, especially if you have multiple Mastodon accounts. And lastly, John recently wrote about this. Buffer, the social media management tool for social media professionals like John, now supports Mastodon, including the ability to schedule posts on Mastodon, which I know for somebody like John, maybe sometimes you are scheduling a post about, maybe you want to share an article again, or you need to thank a sponsor, or you're sharing, a post to a podcast episode or whatever. It's useful if you're running a media publication to have the ability to schedule stuff. And now you can schedule stuff on Mastodon using Buffer.
Right. I heard from a couple of people when I wrote about this last week that they were concerned that it would create spam. And, all those kind of tools have the ability for that. But for me, it's like a big time saver. And a real concrete example is that when I put together App Stories on a Sunday for publishing the App Stories Plus version, I actually write the tweet that I'm going to use on Monday when the public version is available, and I schedule it because I'm working on App Stories then. It's fresh in my mind what we talked about, and it makes more sense to do it then and have it automatically tweet out sometime on Monday morning than to interrupt my Monday morning and do it then. All right, Federico, let's close this out with some things that we've learned from this exploration about what we want to see in the future, because I think that, we're in a time of great innovation, which I love with a new app category. I mean, it's not that Mastodon is new, but the size of the Mastodon client universe has expanded exponentially over the last 2 or 3 months. And that makes it an exciting time. And there are a lot of things that could be done here, I think, to make it even better. And one of the things that Ice Cubes does that I would like to see other apps adopt is to adopt editing your posts, because I think it's probably well known now that I'm very good at doing typos in my Mastodon posts. I was an expert at this on Twitter, and I brought that expertise along with me to Mastodon.
Yes, you brought that talent over to Mastodon.
And it turns out it transfers very well. Fat fingers are just as fat on Mastodon as they ever were on Twitter or anywhere else. And so, yes, I really appreciate the fact that I can go in and fix something on Mastodon, which I couldn't do with Twitter. And the problem only is that if I'm on my iPhone, there are very few apps where I can actually do that, including I don't think the official app supports this on the iPhone. I'd have to double check that, but Ice Cubes definitely does, but I'd love to see it in Ivory and all of these other apps.
Yeah. And I also wanted to mention, I got a couple of things that I really want to point out. I've mentioned this many, many times. The ability to pin an external timeline, like the timeline from another instance. IceCubes has this, Tasker has this. I really would like to have this in Ivory as well. Let me check out the timeline of another instance, because maybe it's an instance like indieapps.space, or another good one, John, iosdev.space. You want to, check out what indie developers for Apple platforms have been up to. Let me pin those timelines. And something else that I will mention, I would like to see more development support, for sure, from Mastodon, from the Mastodon team, but also more support from third-party developers for the Mastodon sync marker API.
Right.
I want all these Mastodon clients to all be in sync with each other when it comes to my spot in the timeline. Instead, right now, it's kind of scattershot. There is a native Mastodon sync marker API, but it's not super reliable. And for that reason, I think developers have come up with their own syncing methods, usually based on iCloud or something else. And instead, I want Mastodon to be like the one true place in the timeline, and I want that one true place to propagate everywhere. Like I want to pick up Elk, and I'm in the same spot where I am in Ivory, and I'm in the same spot where I am in Mona and Ice Cubes, and so forth. So maybe, maybe by the end of this year, we will be in that sort of everything is synced across all clients state.
Yeah, that would be really nice. I'd also like to see some changes to search. I mean, search is obviously very different on Mastodon than it was on Twitter, and it's by design, but too many of these apps require me to pick whether I'm searching for a user profile or a post. And because so few results seem to come up when I'm searching anyway, I'd kind of like to see two expandable lists returned to me every time I do a search. One for people, one for posts, and maybe just show me the top couple of people and the top few posts, and then let me expand it to whichever one that I want, because I invariably will be searching for a person, and I don't press a user. And as a result, in Ivory, for instance, which is the one I've been using the most, I end up getting no results because that person's not mentioned in any posts because it defaults to posts. And I'd kind of like to just not have to think about that up front.
Yeah. I would also mention accessibility. I think developers on all platforms, the web, iOS, iPadOS, Windows, Mac, they should all pay attention to making Mastodon accessible to all kinds of people. That goes for voiceover, for properly labeling your actions, for, accessibility takes different shapes and forms. It also applies to themes. Make sure you have multiple themes for people who are colorblind, for example, different kinds of colorblindness. It goes for keyboard support, for supporting different types of Bluetooth accessories, but just accessibility as an umbrella term for saying, make sure that a diverse audience can use your Mastodon client. And I will also mention, I got a thing for rich links. Make sure it's possible that you can preview those URLs as little nice visual cards in the timeline. On Apple platforms, there's a native Apple API for displaying these rich links. On the web, you can use Open Graph or other meta tags to extract information from a link, but also for how you handle those links. Let me click on those links, long press on those links, show me a context menu, let me share a link contained in a post with other apps, either by using the share sheet or a context menu on Mac and Windows, whatever. Just make sure I can click and share those links.
Yeah, here for the links, because I don't want to have to open the link in a browser in order to share it. I want to be able to long press on it and send it to my favorite Read Later app or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
All right, Federico, that's another great episode. You can find us over on Mastodon, where we have set up special URLs that take you right to our profiles. And once you get to the profile, there's a button that all you have to do is click follow and you're all set.
Yep.
Those URLs are Viticci.macstories.net and johnvoorhees.macstories.net. I also want to thank our sponsors for this particular episode. That is ZocDoc, Fitbod, and Pillow. You can find us on Instagram too, where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.